All right. Welcome back to another episode of Two Plane Sports. Today we've got kind of a packed show, more than we
lot
have
of
been over the last few months.
got a lot of shit to talk about.
Exactly. So before we get into everything, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. Let's go. That was pretty sick.
That's pretty sick. Shout out the Mizzou guys. Mizzou
Yeah.
Water. I forget the name of their show. I apologize.
The Wood, Water, Mizzou podcast. Skeeter, one of the hosts there, made that for us. So
Check
we
this out.
appreciate you for helping us out, brother. Um, all right. So a lot has happened since we last recorded, since I last hopped on for sure. Thanks for Brumbaugh for coming back from his short hiatus there. He will be back later on in the future. I was on vacation, so he came in place, so he will be back hopefully sometime next year. He's still dealing with some stuff personally, so just he was just coming in for a little bit to help out. All right, so we're gonna start with what's pressing today, early National Signing Day. Oklahoma has probably one of the smaller classes. I know definitely one of the smaller classes that they've signed over the last few years, definitely with Brent Venables. And the two big stories coming into today, Michael Fasusi, five-star offensive tackle, and top 100 wide receiver Cortez Mills. Let's start with Michael because I think that one is the one that's more up in the air, or at least has less clarity on what's going on, less knowledge about the situation. He committed to Oklahoma in August, and over the last couple of weekends, he's visited Texas versus Kentucky in Austin, and then he traveled to College Station for the A&M Texas game. Now, after both of those visits, he's still held on to the fact that because Coach B is here, that is why he is going to be at Oklahoma. He hasn't decommitted, but as Oklahoma fans know, and really anyone that follows college football, anything can happen when it comes to signing day. When that pen hits paper is when things become official. So, how confident are we that he's going to be a Sooner? Brandon, I'm going to let you go first on this one. Fasusi, Sooners. Is it going to happen, or do we think we're going to have a heartbreak at the last second there?
I think if I had to wager on it, if I had to place bets on it, I would pick Oklahoma. The confidence level, I don't know how you can be super confident if you're any of the three programs. I think Oklahoma has the best shot, should be the most confident, I guess. But I mean, at the end of the day, if you're going on these multiple visits back to back like that, you're not 100% sold. I think that his relationship with Coach B is something that is pretty strong. Obviously, he had multiple opportunities now to decommit, to announce. He could have announced on one of those visits that he was leaving, or something like that. That hasn't happened. We haven't seen him tweet like his counterpart in this class, Ryan Foji, that he's locked in. Although his Twitter has been a little interesting. He did retweet the Ben Arbuckle announcement on Twitter. He retweeted us beating Alabama, I think, while he was on a visit with somebody else. While with Texas, he retweeted that. So it's a very interesting Twitter. It's a very interesting follow. And I agree with you. We won't know really until tomorrow or today, until on signing day, where he goes. I think at this point, because he hasn't decommitted, because he's retweeting us beating Bama and retweeting Ben Arbuckle coming to Norman, specifically that last one with Arbuckle coming. I think Arbuckle, from everything that we've seen and looked at, it appears that Coach B is not going anywhere. So that's definitely going to help us in this recruitment process. And I think at the end of the day, depending on who we bring in the portal, because it's going to be a very interesting offseason for us. It's a big offseason for us, probably the biggest one since the other guy left and Brent Venables first came in. It's kind of, that important again as far as the offseason goes. But as it currently shakes up, Texas had a very good offensive line this year. They're bringing in some really good guys. that will be there next year as part of their classes and stuff like that. A&M just got a commitment out of a 5-star out of Missouri who just committed there. So I think another thing that could be enticing besides Coach Bedenbow for Fasusi is I really think if the kid is as advertised and as good as he think is as good as we think he is, as good as people write about him and stuff like that, I think he probably has the best opportunity at the moment from what we watched from our team this season to be a day one guy at Oklahoma versus going to A&M or Texas.
Yeah, I agree. I think Oklahoma gives that opportunity, like you mentioned, for him to come in and be an instant impact player, especially as a tackle. Because if you look at this season, Jay Taylor was maybe your best person at the right tackle spot. Autry had a good showing, but he wasn't like lights out better. He was just more available, honestly. But even still, like Jake Taylor and Jake Sexton, like the hard truth with those two guys is as good and talented and as promising as some of the plays that they've shown on the field, they aren't able to be on the field consistently. And at some point that becomes a big issue, and availability is the best ability. And if they can't be available, then it's just not something that Oklahoma can fully rely on here and just sit back and hope that they're going to have a fully healthy season next season. So, he would be maybe a kind of a, maybe not a lock, but have a good chance to get that right tackle spot and move over to the left side once Howland graduates or moves on to the NFL. So I think he's done really well on the left side. Now I'm kind of in the spot here where, I mean, we talked about it all season. Coach B finally stuck to some consistency, gave his younger players or the guys that he's recruited at high school an opportunity, and they've shown improvement through the games that they've played, not just in practice. So instead of trying to mess up that chemistry and see, hey, let's see if they can work on the right side here, just let Ozida and Howland keep improving together on the left side, make them make it easier for them to continue to develop, learn that communication, have a chemistry there between the two of them, and then fill in center, right guard, right tackle. And I think talking about Fasusi, he's got an opportunity to be that right tackle guy to start his career at Oklahoma and then shift to the left side. Um, but it's going to be one where has a little bit of a Peyton Bowen feeling, David Hicks feeling where, it's something that's going to come at, we're not going to know until he tweets something or Hayes Fawcett tweets something like pens hit paper, he's officially signed with X school. And obviously, it seems like Oklahoma's just the leader by a little bit because of the Coach B relationship. So that's got to be what, still having him is definitely promising for this class right now.
I think real quick before we move on to the next guy, the situation to compare it to a guy that's in this current cycle, this current class, is a guy that we kind of looks like we just lost out on in Caleb Burns, who was committed to Baylor, and then Oregon, Oklahoma, a couple other schools made a big push at him. I thought we saw some crystal balls and stuff come in for Oklahoma to land Caleb Burns, and it looks like he's standing pat in that commitment to Baylor, according to Hayes Fawcett on Twitter tonight. And he flirted hard, and it ended up staying at Baylor. And I think this situation could end up being pretty similar to that.
Yep. Yeah, I agree 100%. And then the next guy, the last guy we'll talk about here for the class, because honestly, this cycle has been pretty quiet for Oklahoma throughout the year. It's mostly why we haven't talked about it. It hasn't been as exciting, really, to cover this season. But Cortez Mills, top 100 wide receiver in this class, he has been committed to Oklahoma since earlier this season. I don't recall the date that he committed, but if you do recall, we didn't cover it here, but I'm sure you guys saw it on Twitter or somewhere else. He visited Nebraska earlier this season, about midway through the season. He took a visit there. And obviously, kind of a big big thing to talk about at that time because of the Brent Venables commitment policy. Well, he stayed committed, tweeted after that visit to Nebraska that he was still locked in. Over the last week or so, things have ramped up again with Nebraska. Reportedly, a gigantic NIL deal for him or offer, one that some may say is uh, overpaying, but Nebraska thinks that's kind of his value. That's kind of the world of NIL we live in. Your value is what one school decides it is, not a market. So if it is an NIL decision, then good for that guy. You know, you gotta at this point at the world of college football, it is what it is. But he did tweet after the Arbuckle hire a picture of him still in an OU uniform, and it seems like while that flip hasn't happened yet, it there's still the feeling of it's bound to happen. But the fact that he hasn't decommitted yet is something that you can kind of get back on and not breathe a sigh of relief, but still have some confidence that Oklahoma is at least in it till the last second.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be awesome to land Cortez Mills. I think the guy's going to be a stud. This one I don't feel good about. I think he did tweet that pic or Instagram story that picture, whatever it was, and that's obviously cool to see. You hope that he's sticking out at Oklahoma, but I mean, without having I'm not an insider and stuff, but I read all this stuff on three and stuff like that. It really looks that he's trending, the opposite direction. I think he's probably going to end up a Husker. I hope I'm wrong. I think the kid's going to be really good, but it's like Peyton Kirkland 2.0. I think with this one, I think Peyton Kirkland really tried to throw everybody off the scent. He kind of did a better job, I think. Because somebody came out with I forget who it was, Gary Hamilton, I think, came out with the last second switch or whatever, and did predict that Texas would land him, and he got ridiculed and stuff by a lot on social media, and it turned out he was right. I think maybe that post is Cortez Mills trying to do a similar thing and kind of throw people off the scent for whatever reason, but I do think he ends up at Nebraska.
Yeah, that seems to be kind of where that one's trending. Maybe something changes over tonight as we're recording this. I mean, we still have a few hours, I guess, 12-ish hours before things really start rolling with kids signing those letter of intents. So a lot of stuff is going to happen over the next 24 hours. Just if you're someone that really cares about recruiting, you're going to be locked into Twitter, seeing what Fasusi and Mills and a few other guys end up doing. And maybe Oklahoma can pull off some sort of last second flip for a guy like Burns. I think with this cycle of recruitment, Oklahoma is going to be diving in to the deep end for the transfer portal and seeing what they can get out of there, and hopefully some, highly talented guys. I mean, Brownlow Dindy's finally, after what feels like forever, has hit the portal. He hasn't had a great career at A&M. Who knows if Oklahoma's going to go after someone like that after losing DJ Terry to graduation. So, I mean, Oklahoma's got to look at a lot of stuff, not just replacing some guys on the defense, but adding talent to the offensive line position, maybe a couple wide receivers, running backs, defensive backs. There's stuff that Oklahoma's going to go into here. I think the transfer portal is going to be this season's high school recruiting cycle where it gets a little crazier than normal.
Feels that way.
All right. Now, moving on to the next topic of conversation, and probably what everyone's been talking about in other podcasts and shows. Ben Arbuckle is officially Oklahoma's next offensive coordinator. It's something that you and I discussed when I think Luttrell first got fired, and as the season was going on, getting to the end here, we did a video where we both agreed he was one that Oklahoma should have narrowed their target on pretty early in the process, and it's clear that they did, that they at least identified him as someone that they really wanted to explore for this opportunity, and they were able to secure him after what seems like a heavy back and forth between Oklahoma and Arbuckle and Utah. But at the end of the day, Oklahoma was able to secure their guy. And someone that has had really good offenses and has had pretty good quarterback development over his time. He was at Western Kentucky. I think he was at Western Kentucky when Bailey Zappi was there,
Yeah.
if I remember correctly. And then first year at Washington State, he has Cam Ward. We all saw what Cam Ward did at Washington State, and I was doing, was a Heisman hopeful this season at Miami. And then this year, the guy that Oklahoma fans are going to be looking at if anything happens with the quarterback situation is John Mateer, his quarterback for this year at Washington State, had a pretty good season. So, Brandon, we talked about our Arbuckle before, so you don't need to go into the nitty gritty. And I'm sure a lot of people have already talked about their thoughts on Arbuckle, but why are you excited about him being the hire? And is he going to be the guy that ultimately, quote unquote, saves Brent Venables' job?
I mean, I think there's a lot of things to be excited about. First of all, I think that process was just not fun. Going back to where Sunday, Monday, where it felt like it was never going to happen, we're going to be screwed forever. I think there's something about these Oklahoma coaching searches, because I remember back when we were looking into Brent Venables and stuff, that took a while to get done. And then, that I was on edge for a while there. And then this one, deja vu. It's just not fun waiting. I think we're a little bit impatient. They got it done. I think he was the best guy for the job. I think he was the best possible OC candidate that you could hire. And it's good that you get it done now. You look at Michigan, they just opened up an OC job. Not saying that he would have taken that job or whatever, but it's always fun to not have to compete against Michigan for the guy at the same position. It's fun to beat out Utah. Utah is still looking for an OC at the moment, so it's good that we got it done now. Before signing day and stuff, we can really hit that. Because I agree with you. I think we're going to be hitting that transfer portal window pretty hard, and I think he'll be able to sell a lot of guys on his style of offense. But I mean, there's so many things to be excited about. He's the 12th best scoring offense at like 37 points a game, which I expect that number to dip if we're being realistic. In his first season at Oklahoma, we're installing a brand new kind of game plan. We're still trying to figure out who's going to play where, who's going to be who. We don't know what the team's going to look like at the moment. So I expect it to dip a little bit, but even if it dips a little bit, if he goes from 37 points a game to 27 points a game, let's say it takes a whole 10-point swing. I think we talked about it all season long. 27 points a game, more often than not, is going to have us in every game that we play. I think we're going to be a lot more competitive. We're going to be able to win a lot more games. And I've talked about it. I think 8 wins is that threshold for next season. And I do think that if we're at 27 points a game, just as an average, I think we're going to be in that 8-game mark. I think it's going to be a lot better. You look at, passing, it was like 267 a game. What you mentioned, what he's done with the quarterbacks is obviously fantastic. I think if you look at just the stat sheet or whatever, they're 55th in rush offense, and that sounds like it's, not good or whatever, but it's still like 171 a game or something. I think nobody's going to be mad about 170 yards rushing a game. He runs a fun offense where you can pass run. He kind of adapts. I think the coolest thing he said is he's learned from, 3 different types of coordinators, really. He's got the air raid, he's got the pro style, and he's got, more of a rushing attack, and he kind of adapts based on personnel. And I think that's going to be huge, because we like to think that we're going to be able to pass the ball a lot better this year or this upcoming season. And I do think we will, but in certain games, no matter who you are, you're going to get bottled up in the pass game or bottled up in the rush game. And I think having the ability to adapt on the fly and kind of mix it up, even mid-game plan or whatever, mid-game, to maybe if it was supposed to be a running attack game and it's not working, we're going to switch it to a pass attack and kind of hit on that, or vice versa. And I think he's going to bring that to the table. And I think, you tweeted it, and I think it's really cool. We've got now 2 guys on staff who are candidates for that Broyles Award, which is, that's pretty impressive. And I think it's really cool that both dudes are 29 and 30. We've talked about it at length. I think, being a younger guy yourself is going to be so much better in the world of recruiting, especially for what it appears we're going to be targeting this offseason, and guys who are going to be ready to come in and step in and play on day one. And I think that's kind of the plan. I think he'll be able to recruit the shit out of that transfer portal window. There's a lot to be excited about.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that people are not fans of is that air raid tag that he has with his offense, which I think is kind of just a generalization. If you look at his offense, the Cam Ward year, I would understand why you have that. They threw the ball around like crazy. They had high passing numbers as a quarterback and overall offense, just explosive offense in the passing game. But this season was more run reliant, and that was because of who he had on his team. The running back wasn't actually really the main ball carrier; it was his quarterback, John Mateer. John, and we'll talk about it here in a little bit, but made a lot more explosive plays with his legs than he did with his arms in the games that I've seen so far from this past year with him at the helm. The one thing that I'll disagree with you on that you said is that there's a dip here because of personnel. I don't think that there's going to be that big of a dip. I think if anything, it's going to be 5 point dip on average, and not because of the personnel he has, because I think he's shown that he can put together a good offense with whoever he has, but it might dip because of the conference that he's now playing in. Not because his style of offense isn't going to be successful, but just these defenses are faster. These players are bigger, uh, more sophisticated, quote unquote defenses. He had a really good offense against probably the best Pac-12 conference we had seen in, almost 2 decades last year. The SEC is still a little different, regardless of whatever bias some people like to throw out this time of the year because of the playoffs. The SEC defenses are different. They're different than the Big Ten. Even the Big Ten has good defenses, but they're just different styles of playing, right? That's where I could see where he might have a little bit of an adjustment, is adjusting the offense to making sure they play fast enough to get past the defenses they're playing. But on the flip side, he is going to be practicing against one of the better SEC defenses in the country. So he should have them pretty well prepared come, August of next year, September of next year. Now, I think we can go ahead and safely move on to the next topic, which is the quarterback situation. I know I kind of rushed into that, but it's really going to be the conversation over the next probably week or so. The portal opens next week. So he's got time to go in and see what he has in Jackson Arnold and Michael Hawkins. The anticipation of potentially Mateer being in the portal, he hasn't officially actually done that. I know there was a tweet yesterday that, John Mateer is expected to enter the transfer portal. He is not officially in the portal. He's not one of those guys that has tweeted himself or had Hayes Fawcett or someone else tweet that he's going to be entering the portal when it opens. He is very much still a Washington State Cougar. So if he does enter the portal, hypothetically, is he going to even entertain Oklahoma? Because they might retain Jackson Arnold. That's a question mark, or the biggest question here with this Arbuckle hire. Retain Jackson Arnold or go after John Mateer. It's going to be very similar, going back to what you said, to like the offseason when Brent Venables came in as the head coach. Try your hardest to retain the quarterback you had, the 5-star quarterback you had in, at that time, Caleb Williams, or go to the guy that is familiar with your offensive coordinator in that offense and get Dylan Gabriel, and in this case, John Mateer. Brandon, you and I have had a back and forth over the last couple of days, even when we were just speculating that Ben Arbuckle was the guy. Go ahead and the stage is yours. Jackson Arnold, John Mateer. Is there a right answer? Is there a wrong answer? What say you?
So I do. We've talked about this for a while now. Text about it. I think both quarterbacks would be good in a Ben Arbuckle system, assuming that the offensive line gets fixed. I do think it's going to get fixed. I mean, I think it's it really can't get worse. So I think the offensive line is going to be a little bit better. I think you're going to get some receivers back. I don't know, all five that were out this year. I don't know if all five are retained or if all five decide to stay. I think some eventually hit the portal, some might stay, whatever. I think we're also going to bring in maybe a one or two receivers out of that portal. So the receiver room is going to be a little bit different, but I think it's going to be better. I think you found something with your running game in Xavier Robinson and Javonte Barnes and even Taylor Tatum. I think if he fixes his fumble issues, I think there's going to be a lot better pieces around whoever said quarterback is next year. So I think either one is going to be good. I don't think there's truly a right or wrong answer. There's going to be people on both sides of this debate. If Mateer does hit the portal, and I think you brought up a good, because if he does portal bound, it's not a lock for him to go to Oklahoma. I think he 1,000% entertains Oklahoma. It would be crazy for him not to. He's put up great numbers under Ben Arbuckle, playing in the SEC versus the Pac-2. The spotlight, the recognition that you'll get. There's a lot of things that I think would make a lot of sense for him to go to Oklahoma, obviously. But at the end of the day, we've talked about it and stuff. I think they're very similar players. You look at John Mateer, he's a guy that runs the ball a lot. Jackson Arnold towards the end of the season there, especially those last 2 weeks, kind of showed that he has that mobility too. Even in the Ole Miss game, he had, I think, 40 yards rushing or whatever, but that's insane because he got sacked 10 times and he should have had negative 70 yards rushing. So yeah, I think he really ran for about 100 yards on them too. So Jackson Arnold, he has it with his legs too. And I think, I started looking at box scores. I haven't looked at all of the game tape yet, but that will happen. I'm very excited about Ben Arbuckle. But my biggest knock on John Mateer, and this is not to say Jackson Arnold's perfect, because he's made his fair share of mistakes. Don't get me wrong, but you look at the Texas Tech game. John Mateer was 9 for 19 for 100 yards and a touchdown and a pick. Granted, he ran all over them, and maybe that was part of the game plan, but those are not good passing numbers. You look at, I think, against almost every decent team they played, his numbers really dipped. Even the Fresno State game, he was, I think, 17 out of 35 for 100-something yards and a pick, no touchdowns. Again, ran all over them. So whatever. I think when it comes down to it, they're very similar type athletes. Jackson Arnold, I think, on the potential side is better than what John Mateer could be at his very best. I think Jackson Arnold throws a better ball. I prefer Jackson Arnold to be quarterback one next year. But again, I don't think there's a wrong answer. And the argument for Jackson is, I think, in my opinion, how he came on towards the second half of the season. The Tennessee game, 100%. That was the worst game he's ever played. That was terrible. There's really nothing good that he did in that game. The one time he was protected, he threw an interception right to a Tennessee defender. He fumbled the ball twice, one at the 5-yard line, one threw the ball backwards, and Tennessee recovered. That game, he beat Oklahoma that night. That was not a very good night for him. But I think he's shown a lot of progression throughout the season. I think he's got a lot better. I think he'll be only better with Ben Arbuckle, a real OC, a real quarterback coach. I mean, look what Kevin Johns did with Arnold. Once he kind of got to actually kind of put his hand on him and kind of work with him, he was just significantly better. Again, not perfect, but a lot better. And he's doing this with the worst offensive line we've had here in years and the worst receiving core we've had here in years. Jackson, I don't think Jackson really has had a fair shot at Oklahoma yet. And that's to say the same thing with Hawkins. I think if John Mateer was QB1 for Oklahoma this year and Jackson Arnold was QB1 for Washington State, I think the numbers look pretty slanted for Jackson Arnold, like they do right now for John Mateer.
Yeah, and that's something that we've agreed on this season, and we talked about it throughout the season. As much as maybe sometimes I've been more critical of this team with the performance they've had, as you just mentioned, it's not really fair, especially for the quarterbacks, to judge them based on this season completely. I think the one time you can truly say Jackson Arnold, you can get a grasp of who Jackson Arnold is as a quarterback fully, is going back all the way to last year's bowl game and the Alamo Bowl. He threw all over the field, but he also had a lot of picks, right? If he can have a quarterbacks coach that can help him clean up those mistakes and get back to getting it down the field, I agree with you. The potential that he has is more promising just based off what we've seen than John Mateer. Now, John Mateer doesn't have quite those turnover problems, or he, at least he hasn't shown them in his career. He this season, while statistically Jackson Arnold has not thrown as many picks, he has 3 total picks this season. Those 3 came early in the season when he was asked to do more stuff downfield. As after he got benched and came back, he wasn't asked to do much. We talked about it throughout this year. We talked about it in text conversations. Most of his passes, even early on in the year, but he was asked to try to get it downfield earlier in the season. But after coming back, most of his passing game was within 10 yards, if not shorter. Check downs, 5 yard slants. It wasn't anything crazy where he was like if he threw into double coverage, then you just aren't reading a defense, and it's kind of a ding as a quarterback. Like you're not seeing what's in front of you before throwing it. John Mateer, on the other hand, I think averages almost 10 yards an attempt. So he has the risk of putting it in danger more. And I agree with you. That first play against Texas Tech, bad throw. You don't put it in that situation. But that was it was his what second game this season. So and this year was his first time as a full-time starter. So it can be kind of drawn to a rookie mistake or a first-time starter mistake as much as maybe it shouldn't have, because this is his third year in college. He's a redshirt sophomore, so maybe he should have been more prepared. You can have your own argument there. It just is what it is. He threw a pick and it was a bad one. Um, can he improve coming to Oklahoma? The one big thing, and again, going back to this is basically a Caleb Williams versus Dylan Gabriel. This is Jackson Arnold versus John Mateer. You're hoping that the potential with Jackson Arnold kind of lives up to the hype that we've all wanted it to. And I think he can be. We talked about it. The talent is there. We've seen it going again, Alamo Bowl. We've seen it when he's had competent coaching. This season is just it was unfair for him and Mike Hawkins. So if he decides, and if the staff decides, if Arbuckle decides Jackson Arnold can be the guy for this team, Jackson Arnold really hasn't shown that there's a reason for him to want to leave. He's just said all the right things in press conferences, but he committed to Oklahoma after taking really one visit. If we go back to and look at his recruitment in high school, he came one time in early January for a visit. And if we remember, it was him and Jaden Rashada that Oklahoma was gonna take, and it was just a race to who was gonna commit. Jaden Rashada visited, I think, late December. Jackson visited early January, and Rashada was expected to visit the next weekend, but Jackson committed basically on the spot, and it was all said and done. We had our 5-star quarterback for that 2023 class. Can he see that? Can he kind of overlook this season, not hold it against Brent Venables, and say, I trust that you're still going to put me in a good situation with this new offensive coach and this new offensive coordinator. So I'm going to stick around if you'll have me, if and learn from Arbuckle and show you that I can be the guy that we all wanted me to be.
Yeah, and I mean, it'd be awesome to be a fly on the wall in the initial conversations that I'm sure Arnold and Arbuckle have already had, and maybe the three of them together. I'm sure there's no way that they're not already talking and trying to figure out what's going to happen. It'd be so cool to listen to those conversations. I think Arnold could be the guy. I think Hawk could be the guy. I think Mateer could be the guy. I just think and maybe I'm not the only one, but maybe I'm part of the few here. I think Arnold really showed a lot towards the end of the season there. He ran all over Alabama. That deep ball to JJ Hester in the LSU game, he was protected for a decent amount of time to do it. That ball was beautiful. I mean, right on the money. He hit Jacob Jordan rolling out on the sideline in that LSU game. And, he's made some plays. He has, I think the biggest knock on Arnold is because I think both guys are actually pretty good at protecting the ball this year. We kind of broke down the numbers yesterday. So John Mateer had 346 attempts this season to Jackson Arnold's 246. So granted, he threw the ball 100 more times than Arnold, but he threw 7 picks to Arnold's 3. And I think, if Arnold throws 100 more passes, he probably gets picked off a couple more times, 5 or 6 or whatever. So they're probably similar, whatever. But I don't know, man. I think Arnold has it, and I think it's just not fair at the moment to judge him, or Hawk or whoever, based on this season. But it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be a fun because that's something that I think the next 2 to 3 weeks, or probably less than that, if with how fast college football moves. But that's what I think what we're gonna. That's the first big domino, I think, in terms of our offseason is, does John Mateer eventually hit the portal? I'm sure he will. Whether or not he comes to Oklahoma, I don't see him staying in Washington State without Ben Arbuckle. I think he'll go try it out somewhere else, wherever that might be. So when and if he does hit the portal, but likely does he commit to Oklahoma? Or do we see in the coming days, before anything happens, Jackson Arnold decommits, and that's kind of, a foreshadowing situation to John Mateer might be the guy, because whatever. That's, I think, I mean, it's definitely your first domino to fall for the Oklahoma offseason is, does Arnold transfer? Does Mateer eventually hit the portal? And if he does, do we see him in Norman a couple of days after that and committing? I think the writing's on the wall. If regardless of what happens with Arnold and Hawk, if they don't decommit right away, if John Mateer does decommit and we see that he's committing to Oklahoma, I think you can pretty much say goodbye to, I think, probably both of them.
Yeah, there's a fair shot at that. I go back and forth here. I think as we're talking now, I lean Arnold because of that potential. But if you told me tomorrow that John Mateer is going to be the quarterback, I'm also not going to be disappointed because he's a gamer. And I think that very similar to the thought that I had with Dylan Gabriel, he's going to have a better wide receiving core next year. At least that's what we expect. And people coming back from injuries, it should be better than what he had at Washington State. Because at Washington State, he really only had Kyle Williams. He had one guy to rely on mainly. He should hopefully have a better offensive line situation because John Mateer didn't stay clean. He was sacked 31 times this season. Maybe not as many as Arnold, but still hit a lot. So hopefully has a better line this season. And you're playing in a bigger conference where the pressure's there. He seems like a guy that steps up to the plate, given that he was like a two-star recruit and has developed his way all the way to being the starting quarterback at maybe not a major program anymore, but a one-time major program. There's a there's a lot to like either way. But
Yeah.
speaking as we're talking right now, I'm all for Jackson Arnold being the quarterback going into next season again.
I mean, I think you hit on the head. I'm with you. I lean Arnold, but I think at the end of the day, if we get the news that Mateer commits, I'm going to be excited. I think he's going to be really good at Oklahoma. I will be a little bit sad for the Jackson Arnold, story that it didn't work out the way we wanted it to. And I think, what's going to happen is if it does happen and Arnold, is not our quarterback next year, it's going to be painful to watch him be really good somewhere.
I agree. Hopefully, just not in the SEC. That's what we got to hope right now. If he were to leave, just don't leave into the SEC.
Yeah. It's going to be a
All
fun
right,
offseason.
man.
We'll see.
I agree. Let's see what happens over the next few weeks. It's gonna be fast. There's gonna be a lot that's happened. So make sure to like this video, subscribe to this channel, turn on the notification bell. We're gonna stay as up to date to keep you guys as up to date on what's going on with the portal, with recruiting, with this whole coaching staff situation. It's something we didn't even touch on today. Is Finley gone? Is he staying? DeMarco up in the air. Who's staying? Who's going? So stay tuned for everything that's come over the next few weeks with the craziness of college football. We'll see you guys next time.